Hi everyone, it's Michelle from Country Morning Creations. I have been asked to do a tutorial on how I get my coffee dyed paper to have this marbled effect. It's very consistent throughout. Some pages actually have the darkness on the edge already part of that. So I have put together, and some of my papers actually come out with some really glorious marbling when I do it this way. What you need to do, start out with your liquid. This can be coffee, this can be tea, it could be avocado, whatever you're going to do. If you would like to see how I make mine acid neutral, I will link that below. So take a look down below in the description box. There will be a link there for my coffee dyed paper recipe, how to make your stuff acid neutral. You also need some paper. Now, my paper of choice is the Hammermill Premium Color Copy. It is, I'm not sure that it says on here, but it is acid neutral. This is the 28 pound. That's the one that I like. So I buy this in a really big batch. But it is, let's see, what is it? Acid free, there we go. So this is acid free as well. And a big part, some people really want their pages to be acid free. There's a lot of people who feel like it really doesn't matter. So whatever works for you. I try to make everything acid free because I feel like it will last a lot longer. And I have heard of people writing on regular coffee dyed paper that the ink disappears over time. And if you use pencil, it will disappear over time. All right. Now, I prefer to glove up. One time I didn't glove up and I felt like I was absorbing the coffee through my skin, and by the time I was done I was really hyper. That may have just been something in my own brain and I was just super stoked about making coffee dyed paper, but anyway, I prefer to glove up. What you need is your pan of this, your paper, and then I also have a pan that has this is a cookie sheet on it. And the first thing we're going to do is simply take our paper. I dip it one at a time. Some people do it differently. That's how I do it. I am just going to dip each piece of paper in the coffee. And I take it and I let it drain off a little bit. What we're going to do for the first step, this actually can take up to 3 days to do if you live in a particularly humid area. Now, if you don't live in a particularly humid area like I do, I usually can get this done in about 24 hours. But what we want to do is actually, and this is part of I'm struggling here for a minute, is trying to get this paper to all line up. So we want each piece of paper lined up perfectly on top of the next piece. And I am on the struggle bus right now trying to get these to line up. All right, well, they're not going to be perfect, and that's probably okay that they're not perfect, but we want to get them lined up to the best of your ability, to line them up one right on top of the other. And I find that by sliding it just a little bit, that makes a big difference. So all we're going to do now is stack all of this up in one big stack. And I will explain to you what we're going to do with that. Now, don't panic. I know some of you guys are going to panic and say, but wait, isn't it all going to melt together? I thought that too. And actually, I do have to tell you, I learned this technique from Emily over at Raven Relics. And I will link her below as well. I asked her because I loved how her coffee dyed paper turned out. So I had asked her what she does, and this is her technique. So this is not original with me. And I'm not even sure that she came up with this technique, but it works beautifully. And so for now we are just going to dip and stack paper. At this point, I now have my tray with a pretty big stack. This is probably over 100 sheets of paper. I am just going to leave this here like this for about an hour to let it drain. I do like to take a piece of regular white paper and I just put that lightly on top. This actually helps prevent the oxygen from oxidizing the coffee and making it too dark. So this is part of my trick to keeping my paper that really, really beautiful light color and having it not be, too dark. If you like it darker, this is not going to be a method that you will want to use. I have taken it at this point, put it on a cookie sheet and put it in the oven, but what I found was then I was tied to the oven all day. As the top couple of layers would dry, I would pull them off, and it really also makes it very wrinkly. So part of this as a lazy girl hack is that when we're done, I don't have to iron all this paper. I also am not tied to an oven all day. I am not also, I've also done this where I've laid this out on a table, but what I've found is that the top layers get dark. You get all these different lines. A lot of people love that. If you love that, go for it. This is how I have learned to do coffee dyed paper so that it's just a nice, consistent color with just a light marbling effect in it. I will be back in about an hour, and for you, that'll be about 2 seconds. And I'll show you what we're going to do next. So this is a long process in the sense that this can take up to 3 days, but I am not tied to anything. Once you get this first stack done, you can walk away and do other things. And that's what I love about this method and being a lazy girl. I'm not standing around dealing with paper all day. I can do it. This took me about a half an hour to stack this much paper. Later on, I'll spend maybe another 2 minutes doing something. Tomorrow morning, then we'll do something else. But Yes, so I'm going to come back in about an hour. We're going to take this off the rack and put it down into the pan. See you in a minute. At this point, this has pretty much stopped dripping. I like to move it over onto something where I can move it around at least, and it doesn't get in my way. And so I'm taking this whole soggy piece of paper, this whole stack. This I'm going to set aside now for about 12 hours. You can go 12 to 24 hours. What I've found though is if you go longer than 24 hours, it does actually start to stick together. I find that in my dryer community, I need to only go about 12 hours. If it's really, really humid where you are, go ahead and let it go up to 24 hours. I'll be back in a bit. At this point, the paper has now just kind of dried for about 12 hours. Now, I only do about 12 hours because I live here in Colorado. This paper is actually wet, but not soaking wet anymore. And I find that if I wait too long, that the paper actually, the edges start to melt together. So for 12 hours, it works for me. Now, my friend Emily, who told me about this, she lives in New England where it's much more humid. She lets hers sit 24 hours. So you may have to play around with this exact method. But, again, the awesome thing is I was able to make the pile. I've let it sit for 12 hours. I've gone off and done a lot of other things. Now, the next step is to divide this into 3 separate piles. I actually have no clue why this works. It just seems to work. And so I am grabbing this and I'm going to divide it approximately-ish into thirds. And we're going to just let these 3 now sit overnight. And let's divide this one about in another third. And what you'll see as part of this process, what's going to happen is some of this is going to get very dark, like you see here. It's gotten darker on the top. And I'm finding that maybe I should have let this sit a wee bit longer, but we'll see. Let me see if I can get all 3 pieces, all of these pieces together and put it back. It feels a lot like leather at this point. Whoops, I really didn't want to do that. But you can figure out that what I'm doing is, again, just dividing these into 3 sections, approximately 3 equal sections. This is why I put this piece of paper on the top here, was so that it would, you can see how dark this gets. And these pieces will probably get that dark as well. And that's okay. And so at this point, I'm going to smooth these all down, make sure they're all flat. We're going to let this go about another 12 hours. And I'll show you the final step. Well, good morning. It is now the next morning. These have been sitting out for almost 12 hours at this point. And today is the final step. So today what I'm going to do is I'll show you how I lay out my paper. I actually use my guest bed, but you could use your own bed. You can, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But what I do is I take a plastic tablecloth, just one of those expensive ones, and I lay it out over my bed, and now I've got a beautiful work surface to spread all of this paper out. I probably will not crawl back into that bed until tonight, so even if it was my own bed, I could still do it that way. So let me pause here. We've got our 3 piles, and what I generally do is about 1 stack will cover the bed. So this may take 3 tries to get all of this paper dry. And I will show you here in a minute, when I come right back, as to what it looks like. So as you can see here, I now have all of this laid out on my bed. It's a nice big flat surface. It's not perfectly flat. If you had a perfectly flat surface, then your paper would come out very, very flat. But mine is not perfectly flat, so this will be a little bit wrinkled, but I don't feel like I ever actually have to iron it again. So I will be back to show you the finished product. And here we are a couple of hours later, and it's all dry. And I simply pick it all up and just make stacks with it, and it all stacks up beautifully. And then I'll go ahead and lay out the next set, and usually within a day I have all of the paper dry. And that is how I coffee dye my paper. I hope I've inspired you to be creative today.